Symbolism is the ancient language of the universe and soul, a potent tool that transcends the barriers of time and space. It speaks directly to the subconscious mind, bypassing the rational mind, and planting seeds of thought and emotion that blossom into actions and ideologies. From the sacred geometries inscribed in the temples of antiquity to the subtle cues embedded in modern media, symbols carry with them the power to elevate or ensnare. In the hands of the enlightened, symbols illuminate the path to higher understanding and spiritual awakening. Yet in the grasp of those who seek control, these same symbols become instruments of manipulation, crafting illusions that lead the unwary astray. This is the essence of psychological warfare, a battle not fought with swords and guns, but with ideas and images that penetrate the fortress of the mind, reshaping the conditions of humanity itself. Let us draw upon the wisdom of the ages and the keen insight of our own discernment, so that we shall uncover the veiled message that permeates our culture, decode their meaning, and reclaim the sovereignty of our own minds. This journey requires courage, clarity, and a relentless due diligence on the quest for truth. But in the end, the rewards are immeasurable. A deeper understanding of the forces that shape our world and the awakening of our true potential. Welcome to Beyond the Forbidden Veil, episode 2.1, Symbolism, Psychological Warfare, and Subversive Use of Symbolism. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode in Beyond the Forbidden Veil. Very excited to bring this episode to you. So without further ado, let's get right into the content. Alejandro Jodorowsky says, "What I am trying to do when I use symbols is to awaken in your unconscious some reaction. I am very conscious of what I am using because symbols can be very dangerous. When we use normal language, we can defend ourselves because our society is a linguistic society, a semantic society. But when you start to speak, not with words, but only with images, the people cannot defend themselves." So this is a crucial prerequisite for understanding what I'm going to be bringing to the table today. Alejandro Jodorowsky is a famous film director. He directed one of my favorite movies called The Holy Mountain. I'd recommend that to anybody interested in deep esoteric film. So the first thing we need to understand is what a subliminal actually is. A subliminal is something that exists underneath the threshold of monad consciousness. Subliminal is an adjective that comes from the Latin prefix sub, which means below, underneath, or lower, and the Latin suffix limen or liminus, which means threshold, crosspiece, or still, plus the Latin double suffix al, which means of, relating to, or characterized by. The liminal is the zone or framework which consciousness operates within, specifically monad consciousness. So this word liminal is relating to the threshold or boundary of monad consciousness. And then there is the superliminal, which is an adjective from the Latin prefix supra, which means above, over, or on top. So superliminal means existing above the threshold of monad consciousness. So what this means is that subliminals go directly to our subconscious realm. There is a common belief that the effects of subliminal messages are minimal and do not significantly alter individual behaviors, thus posing no real concern, especially morally. The mass amount of studies do not show this to be true. In reality, extensive research indicates that subliminal messages can subtly, yet significantly, influence our thoughts, emotions, and decisions, often without being aware of it. And then we have this slide that says, you won't believe this deal if you actually think about it, with the $ on the cell phone. This itself is a form of subliminal influencing. So it's often cited that the conscious mind represents only about 5 to 10%, and I'd say less than that with most people. So we have about 5 to 10% of our total cognitive processes, while the subconscious mind accounts for approximately 90% to 95%. This estimate highlights the vast amount of information we process outside of our conscious awareness. The subconscious mind plays a critical role in emotional processing. Studies have shown that emotional responses can occur before conscious awareness of a stimulus, suggesting that the subconscious mind evaluates and reacts to information quickly and automatically. Now, I didn't want to just go into this without providing a lot of research. So if you do your due diligence, you will find that there's plenty of research on this topic. So I brought some sources here, which are on the screen now. This is subsequent research and findings on subliminal advertisement, which we're going to be talking a lot about advertisement. Now, I'm not going to go through all of these studies, but I will leave this on the screen so that you guys can see what the studies examine, their findings and conclusions from these studies. You also can look deeper into these studies for yourself. Another very important understanding is how the CIA was also studying subliminal influencing. The CIA's report, The Operational Potential of Subliminal Perception, explores how subliminal cues can be used to influence behavior without the individual's conscious awareness. The report investigates various techniques, including the potential for subliminal messages to trigger specific actions or altered perceptions covertly. The study delves into the psychological mechanisms behind subliminal perception and its application in intelligence and psychological operations, or psychological warfare. The CIA was interested in the potential use of subliminal perception for covert operations, building on earlier research into hypnosis and extrasensory perception. So the key points from this report are things like the techniques and methods. The report outlines different methods for delivering subliminal messages, including visual and auditorial cues that bypass conscious awareness. The application of this report is the potential application explored, including influencing enemy agents, manipulating public opinion, and other strategic use in psychological warfare. The effectiveness of the study shows that the report acknowledges the variable effectiveness of the subliminal techniques, noting that the individual susceptibility and the context of message delivery are critical factors. So that's an important part about a lot of this. It depends on how susceptible you are to this and the context of the message delivery. The CIA also went deeper into this study, and there's all kinds of this out in the open. You guys can research this for yourself. They ended up studying the subliminal and extrasensory idea as well, which explores the boundaries of human perception, focusing on subliminal messaging and extrasensory perception, or ESP. It discusses how messages can be delivered below the threshold of conscious awareness, influencing thoughts, behaviors, and decision-making processes without individuals realizing it. The text examines psychological studies and experiments that illustrate the effects of subliminal stimuli on consumer behavior and emotional responses. It also delves into psychological theories explaining how subliminal messages can bypass conscious filtering and tap into deeper cognitive processes, including conditioning, priming, and emotional manipulation through subtle cues. This text or book outlines various types of extrasensory phenomena, such as telepathy, which is mind-to-mind communication, clairvoyance, gaining information without sensory input, and precognition, predicting the future events. It reviews anecdotal evidence, case studies, and the scientific community's response to these claims. A central theme in this distinction and interaction between conscious thought and subconscious processing, arguing that much of human behavior is influenced by factors beyond conscious awareness, thereby highlighting the complexity of human cognition. And the CIA went on to use this against its citizens and continue to use that to this day. And we're going to see how that works out. So let's take a look at the ethics of subliminal symbolism itself. Not subversive symbolism, but just subliminal symbolism. At its essence, subliminal use of symbolism is harmless and not a violation of an individual's rights. All forms of esoteric art, knowledge, and literature, etc., has within it subliminals. This is the medium for conveying complex ideas and emotions to express what words cannot. Subliminal symbols invite viewers to engage more deeply, encouraging personal interpretations and introspection. By embracing these symbols, we unlock the doors to a profound understanding of both artistic expression and the intricate workings of our own psyche and the universe. Art, in many manifestations, serves as a mirror reflecting the depths of the human soul, inviting us to engage with the cosmos in a more nuanced and enlightened manner. In this sacred exchange, we participate in the external dance of creation and interpretation, weaving a rich tapestry of meaning that elevates our existence. Through the exploration of these symbols, we awaken to the hidden truths that lie within and around us, recognizing that each work of art is a portal to greater wisdom, a bridge to the universal mysteries that unite us all. Thus, art becomes not merely an aesthetic pursuit, but a spiritual journey that enhances our human experience and deepens our connection to the divine fabric of life itself. So my point with this statement is that we use subliminals all over the place. There's subliminal cues, there's subliminal imagery in art, and it's not unethical to use that. But when does it become immoral and unethical? The context of how subliminals are being used makes all the difference. When they are designed to manipulate people without their conscious awareness or direct consent into behaviors which they would not rationally do is the issue, which I call subversive use of sacred symbolism, also known as mind control. This is a manipulative and deceptive tactic which undermines the rights of the individual. People have the inalienable right to make fully informed choices. Subversion bypasses the conscious decision-making process, meaning individuals are not fully aware of what they are being manipulated to do, like, or buy. The truth is of the most importance when it comes to individuals making informed and critical decisions. Using subversive subliminal messages does violate this principle of transparency, truth, and rights. Even 1% of mind control is a violation of another's liberties and should never be accepted as a valid form of information transactions. I would define it this way: the manipulation of an individual to behave in certain ways by imprinting ideas through the use of archetypes, symbols, images, motifs, and social engineering techniques, which is rooted in the deep understanding of the human psychology. When these techniques are used and embedded into the subconscious mind through repetition in stories, advertisements, or media, they deeply influence an individual's choice without the individual being consciously aware of the manipulation being performed on them. Now, this is the crucial part, is that you can be influenced by things subliminally, but as long as it's not interfering with your conscious consent, as long as it's not interfering with your ability to make a moral choice based upon your compass and conscience, then there's no issue with it. But as soon as it subverts that, as soon as it starts to limit your rational understanding and your rational cognitive abilities to make conscious choices, then that's an issue, obviously. This is what we would call manipulation. This is what we would call mind control. To understand how subversive use of symbolism and psychological warfare has advanced, especially in the past century and a half, we need to take a look at some of the key players that were involved in advancing these techniques. One of the key heads was Sigmund Freud, which I'm sure a lot of people are aware of him, especially with his influence with Carl Jung. Sigmund Freud was born on May 6, 1856 in Freiburg, Moravia, which is now the Czech Republic, and he died on September 23rd, 1939 in London, England. He was an Australian neurologist and the founder of psychoanalysts. Freud's work laid the foundation for understanding human psychology through the exploration of the unconscious mind, and he remains one of the most influential and controversial figures in psychology and psychiatry. Sigmund Freud's psychoanalytic theory posits that much of human behavior is driven by the unconscious desires and fears. Subliminal advertisement taps into this unconscious mind, influencing decisions without the individual's awareness, like we said. By targeting deep-seated insecurities and desires, subliminal ads can effectively manipulate consumer behavior. We're going to be talking a lot about the way that advertisements and corporations use symbolism. One of the most well-known and controversial elements of Freud's theory is the Oedipus complex, a concept that he introduced to describe a critical stage in the psychosexual development of children. The Oedipus complex is named after the character Oedipus in Greek mythology, who unknowingly kills his father and marries his mother. Freud used this myth to illustrate his belief that during a specific period in early childhood, boys develop unconscious sexual desires for their mothers and view their fathers as rivals for their mother's affection. This is extremely important to understand because this is used in sexual advertisement and subliminal subversive use of symbolism. Freud's theory of psychosexual development outlines 5 stages through which children progress from birth to adulthood. The Oedipus complex is most relevant during the 3rd stage, known as the phallic stage, which you can see on the screen here, which focuses on genitalias and differences between sexes, and problems and fixations that come from this is vanity, envy, passivity, confusion, confused identities. Oh, that sounds kind of familiar, right? That's a big thing going on today. Kind of interesting. I personally don't agree with all of Freud's ideas, and Jung takes his ideas to another level, which is more into the realm of mentalism and spirituality, which connects back to the ancient occult traditions far more than Freud ever did. And that's really important to understand because technically, even though these guys are seen as the pinnacle of psychology, it's really the ancients who had the pinnacle knowledge of psychology, and they're just rediscovering it and popularizing it to a certain degree. So Freud's work has a lot of issues in it, but I'm sure a lot of people are familiar with the Freudian slips. His work very specifically delves into a lot of sexual ideas, whereas Carl Jung's work delves much deeper than that. During the phallic stage, Freud theorized that boys experience a form of sexual attraction towards their mothers. This leads to feelings of jealousy and rivalry towards their fathers, who are seen as obstacles to boys' desires for the mother. These conflicting emotions create significant anxiety for the child. So that's part of this whole phallic stage. Another important individual that a lot of people don't know about was Leon Festinger. He was born May 8th, 1919, and he died February 11th, 1989. He was an American social psychologist renowned for his development of the theory of cognitive dissonance, a key concept in the field of psychology that has widespread influence across various domains, including psychology, sociology, and marketing. And I would add to that, politics. While Festinger himself was not directly involved with the CIA, the intelligence community has historically shown great interest in his psychological research. His work went on to be used in psychological warfare all over the world. So what is this theory of cognitive dissonance? Leon Festinger's cognitive dissonance theory is a fundamental concept in social psychology that describes the discomfort or tension that arises when a person holds two or more contradictory beliefs, attitudes, or values, or when their behavior conflicts with their beliefs or attitudes. I would simplify this to internal dualism or internal contradiction, and internal cognitive dissonance, right? This theory was introduced by Festinger in his 1957 book, A Theory of Cognitive Dissonance. The key component of this theory are dissonance, its causes, and the methods individuals use to reduce it. Leon Festinger's cognitive dissonance theory suggests that we individuals strive for internal consistency when exposed to subliminal messages that highlight their inadequacies. Consumers experience discomfort, motivating them to take action, such as purchasing products to alleviate this dissonance. So we have to understand how this idea of this internal contradiction, this internal dualism that is taking place, these internal psychological lacks that we have are being used against us, not only by corporations, but also by governments, specifically by the state, to influence us into behaviors that we rationally would not normally do. By playing off of our insecurities, our anxieties, our desires, our wants, and we're going to get deeper into that as we move forward. A lot of people don't know about this guy. You know, I mean, if you're in the field of psychology, people know about this guy, but I've never heard anybody talk about this guy in general, but yet his work is so crucial, and his work is based on some of Freudian's work, and he's based on some other psychologists' work and more ancient understanding of human psychology. Festinger's experiments and research. We're going to focus on one of the most famous experiments demonstrating cognitive dissonance, which was conducted by Festinger and his colleague James Carl Smith in 1959. The participants were asked to engage in monotonous and tedious tasks for an hour, such as turning pegs on a board. After completing the task, participants were divided into 3 groups. Each group was asked to lie to a waiting participant who was actually an actor by telling them that the task was interesting and enjoyable. The first group received $1 for lying, the second group received $20, and the third group, the control group, was not asked to lie. The key findings about this study is that the group that got paid $20 experienced less cognitive dissonance than those who got paid less. They justified their lie by significant financial reward, maintaining that they had a good reason to lie, which did not force them to change their attitudes towards the task. The group who was paid $1 experienced high cognitive dissonance. The small amount was not sufficient to justify the lie, leading them to change their attitude about the task itself. These participants convinced themselves that the task was indeed interesting to reduce the dissonance between their actions, lying, and their beliefs. And then the control group, which did not lie, had no need to adjust their attitudes as there was no dissonance. The experiment demonstrates that when external justifications, like a large monetary reward, is minimal, individuals are more likely to change their internal beliefs to align with their actions, thereby reducing cognitive dissonance. This finding was significant because it shows that internal psychological consistency is a powerful motivator for behavior and attitude change. Anybody who can understand what I just said here can understand how this can be used not only in the work environment, but also politically, socially. This form of mind control is a huge factor in marketing, in the political campaigns. You can see this all over the board. And a lot of this, including some of Freud's ideas, were influenced by Gustav Le Bon. Now, I'm sure a lot of us are aware of this individual, but this individual ended up revolutionizing this idea of subliminal influencing, or I should say subversive use of sacred symbolism. Edward Bernays, born in 1891 and died in 1995, was an influential figure in the development of public relations and modern advertisement. He is often referred to as the father of public relations, and really what he is the father of modern-day propaganda. For his pioneering techniques and theories on mass manipulation, communication, and persuasion. Bernays was related to Sigmund Freud on two sides. Freud's sister, Anna, was Bernays' mother, and his father, Elie, a grain merchant, was the brother of Freud's wife, Martha. Bernays grew up in Vienna, hearing all about Freud's theories on the deeply buried human impulses that drive human behavior. As a young man, he was very interested in the performing arts, particularly ballet and theater, and he began to work in that world as a new sort of publicity man, less focused on posters and ticket sales and more on making his clients a major topic of conversation at dinner parties. His work in that realm attracted the attention of George Creel, who was heading up the government's World War II propaganda effort, and Bernays headed to Washington to join the effort. So here's an example of some of Bernays' work. We're going to go through a few examples of Bernays' work. In 1929, the head of the American Tobacco Company called Bernays up and said, "We're losing half of our potential market. There's a taboo against women smoking. What can we do to break down that taboo?" Bernays asked if he could go talk to a psychoanalyst about it and got the green light. Through that conversation, he came up with the idea of cigarettes being associated with female empowerment and, yes, penis envy. So he called up a few stylish and influential young women he knew, asked them if they would be interested in staging a little protest, walking up and down Fifth Avenue smoking, and they agreed. I'm sure people can connect this to what's going on now. Now, I want to say that things like this are low-hanging fruit, but it's still weaponized, and we have to understand these things that are low-hanging fruits and how they're being weaponized. Once he knew the protest was on, Bernays notified all the newspapers and magazines. His torches of freedom protest spread like wildfire. Within a year, the taboo on women smoking had been permanently lifted. Now understand how effective this was. Not only did he control the media, but he created a Hegelian dialectic to do so. I want to make it very clear here that I am no way advocating for laws or mandates to be placed on individuals, or even unnecessary taboos against what individuals do with their body or their autonomy. The point here is to understand how he was capable of persuading and manipulating the mass population through artificial means. Bernays' incorporation of the psychoanalytical concepts into his PR strategies was innovative but also controversial. By leveraging subconscious desires and fears, he effectively manipulated public opinion in ways that many considered ethically dubious. Bernays began to ponder how best to employ the theories which had already proven so effective in his public relations campaigns. Gustav Le Bon's principles of mass psychology, Wilfred Trotter's herd instinct thesis, and above all, the hidden drives of human beings of Sigmund Freud's work. So these are some of the people who influenced Bernays into creating better mind control techniques. Edward Bernays sought advice and consulted psychiatrist A.A. Brill, one of Sigmund Freud's pupils. Bernays asked Brill, "What is the psychological basis for a woman's desire to smoke?" Brill responded, "Cigarettes, which are equated with men, become the torches of freedom." This insight inspired Bernays' campaign. He aimed to get young feminists to light up cigarettes, torches of freedom, in public as an act of emancipation during New York's Easter parade. And we can see here in these depictions and advertisements, "To keep a slender figure, no one can deny. Reach for a Lucky instead of a Sweet. It's toasted." So these are Lucky Strike cigarettes. This is total subliminal influencing. And here's another one. "Consider your Adam's apple. Don't rasp your throat with harsh irritants. Reach for a Lucky instead. It's toasted." Another example of Edward Bernays' techniques being used is the disposable cup example. On behalf of his client, Dixie, Bernays created the Committee for the Study and Promotion of the Sanitary Dispensing of Food and Drink, which ran various campaigns about how unsanitary using regular old glasses were. And true to form, Bernays incorporated subtle sexual messaging as well in the ads. One ad emphasized that with disposable cups, you never had to wonder if someone else's lips had touched your cup. Others connected imagery of overflowing non-disposable cups to subliminal images of vaginas and sexual disease. It was all in the service of one message, convincing people that disposable cups were more sanitary. And here's an ad for that. Nobody has to waste time washing. There's so many examples of this when you get into it, and people have no idea. We are bombarded with advertisements nowadays. Luckily, nowadays, a lot of people can see through some of this stuff, but unconsciously, these things still have an effect on us. We live in a world of ads. Literally, people have become ads. People wear their ads right on their clothes. They are billboards. And I've talked about this a great deal in previous work. So this is the idea here, is that they're trying to boost sales for an item that people don't want. People didn't want this, so they had to resort to manipulation. What they wanted to do was convince the people that they needed it and that this was the thing that they desired. We're going to see another example of that as we move forward. Bernays' work in World War II as a part of the Committee on Public Information, or you should just call it the Committee on Public Propaganda, showcased the potential of strategic communication to mobilize and influence large populations. His ideas about using psychological principles in marketing and public relations have had a lasting impact on both fields to this very day. The CPI, which was led by George Creel, we already mentioned him earlier, aimed to create a unified narrative to justify the U.S. entry into the war and maintain public support. Bernays was instrumental in developing strategies to communicate the war's importance to the American public. Bernays leveraged various media channels, including newspapers, films, and posters for his propaganda campaign. He crafted compelling stories and visuals that portrayed the war effort positively, often highlighting American values and the fight for quote-unquote democracy. His pioneering contributions to understanding how media and messaging can manipulate public perception is still used to this day. So here's a quote from Edward Bernays. "If we understand the mechanisms and motives of the group mind, it is now possible to control and regiment the masses according to our will without their knowing it. In almost every act of our daily lives, whether it is the sphere of politics or business, in our social conduct or our ethical thinking, we are dominated by the relatively small number of persons who understand the mental process and social patterns of the masses." So understand what he's saying here. He's saying that the masses are manipulated by a small group of people that understand the deeper aspects of the human psyche, because it creates a power differential between those who do know this and those who do not. This is why all the information about these things are occulted. The Betty Crocker conundrum is a great example of of using sacred symbolism to influence people into buying things they don't want. So in the early 1950s, a twisted version of Sigmund Freud's psychoanalytical theories, promoted by his nephew Edward Bernays, was taking America by storm. These ideas were so influential that even the CIA used them for mass population control. One unexpected place where these techniques found great success was in the kitchens of the middle-class American. Betty Crocker's food had developed an instant cake mix, which was considered a miracle of convenience at the time. All you needed to do was add water to the powder, and voila, you had cake batter. However, despite the convenience, the miracle cake mix didn't sell. Unfazed by this setback, Betty Crocker Foods turned to psychoanalysts to quote-unquote solve the problem, essentially to figure out how to manipulate people to buy a product they clearly did not want. Betty Crocker hired a Madison Avenue advertisement firm to delve into why housewives weren't buying their instant cake mix. Using psychoanalyst techniques, the firm discovered that while housewives appreciated the convenience, they felt guilty. They didn't want to deceive their families into thinking they had put in more effort than they actually had, especially since making a cake from scratch involved more personal effort and love. The solution suggested by the psychologist was surprisingly simple. Add 3 words to the instructions. Add 1 egg. That's all they had to do, folks. Just add these 3 words, and next thing you know, their sales were booming. Why is this, you might ask? It's just an egg, right? The egg is one of the most ancient and important archetypal symbols deeply connected to the themes of life, birth, and creation. By incorporating the egg into the cake mix process, the act of baking becomes more meaningful for housewives. In a symbolic way, she was quote-unquote giving life to her husband and family through the cake. Changing the recipe to include adding an egg offered the guilt-ridden housewives a solution or a way out. By doing more than just adding water, by adding an ingredient symbolically linked to her own life-giving and creative power, she could alleviate her internal guilt or her internal cognitive dissonance. We saw how that works. Here's a great example of that. The result? Sales of Betty Crocker's previously unwanted cake mix skyrocketed, and we see it everywhere today, folks. It's on everything. Here's another quote from Edward Bernays. The conscious mind and intelligent manipulation of the organized habits and opinions of the masses is an important element in democratic societies. Those who manipulate this unseen mechanism of society constitutes an invisible government, which is the true ruling power of our country. We are governed. Our minds are molded, our tastes formed, and our ideas suggested, largely by men we have never heard of. It is they who pull the wires that control the public mind. Now, Edward Bernays went on to influence many people in the world, but he influenced one very powerful person in Germany, and that was Joseph Goebbels. Joseph Goebbels was a prominent figure in Nazi Germany, serving as the Minister of Propaganda. Born on October 29th, 1897. Now, I don't speak German, so I will not be able to pronounce this correctly, but I believe it's just right, but with a roll on it. But right, Germany. Goebbels was a close associate of Hitler and played a crucial role in the Nazi regime efforts to control and manipulate public opinion. Goebbels joined the National Socialist Germans Workers' Party, the Nazi Party, in 1924. He quickly rose through the ranks due to his oratory skills and his adept use of propaganda. In 1926, Hitler appointed him as the regional leader of Berlin, where he effectively used propaganda to consolidate Nazi power and diminish the opposition. In 1933, after the Nazis seized power, Hitler appointed Goebbels as the Reich Minister of Propaganda. In this role, Goebbels had control over all forms of media, including newspapers, radio, film, and the arts. Kind of sounds familiar, doesn't it? Goebbels was instrumental in orchestrating major propaganda campaigns, including those that glorified Hitler and the Nazis. Joseph Goebbels' propaganda strategies were heavily influenced by the pioneering work of Edward Bernays. By adopting and adapting Bernays' principle of public relations and psychological manipulation, Goebbels was able to create one of the most effective propaganda machines in history, which is ongoing today. In the final days of the war with Germany on the brink of defeat, Goebbels remained loyal to Hitler. After Hitler's suicide on April 30th, 1945, kind of interesting during the season of sacrifice, which we'll be getting into the season of sacrifice in the future, and we will be talking about these things, especially these events at this time period in the future. Goebbels briefly served as the Chancellor of Germany. However, realizing the inevitable defeat, he and his wife, Magda, committed suicide on May 1st, 1945, after poisoning their 6 children. His ability to manipulate information and public perception played a significant role for the Nazi regime. His ability to manipulate information and public perception played a significant role in the Nazis' regime ability to maintain control and carry out his atrocities. His techniques and strategies have been studied extensively in the context of propaganda, media manipulation, and psychological warfare, and are being used to this day by governments and by the dark occult. All of these tactics have been implemented for thousands of years against the population. These are not new, folks. This is ancient knowledge of the human psyche. Joseph Goebbels says, "This is the secret of propaganda. Those who are to be persuaded by it should be completely immersed in the ideas of the propaganda without ever noticing that they are being immersed in it." So now we're going to take a look at the application of this psychological knowledge. Advertisement is one example of this. Advertisement is an art with ulterior motives. It is used to attract consumers' attentions and make them believe that one brand is better than another, or that they need something that they really do not need. Advertising indirectly sets many cultural norms. It plays on and simultaneously inculcates the internal desires, emotions, and biological impulses, beliefs, needs, and values of an individual and society as a whole. By tapping into deep-seated psychological triggers, advertising not only sells products, but also shapes consumers' behaviors and societal conditions. It leverages themes of status, identity, happiness, and success, often creating an illusion of necessity and urgency, also known as artificial scarcity, which is all circling around material goods and services. There's a great book by Joel Bakan called The Corporation, The Pathological Pursuit of Profit and Power. And I highly recommend anybody who's interested in this topic to read this book. It is extremely revealing. Joel goes on to say, human psychopaths are notorious for their ability to use charm as a mask to hide their dangerous, self-obsessed personalities. For corporations, social responsibilities may play the same role. Through it, they can present themselves as compassionate and concerned about others, when in fact they lack the ability to care about anyone or anything but themselves. So what he's saying here is that corporations are not people, but yet they are ran by individuals. This is true. But the ultimate goal of corporate interest is profit and power. That's it. That's what these people want, profit and power. It goes beyond profit to a certain level because it's about control. That's what it's really about. Now, I want to give an example here about how these things are being used against our children, the children of today and throughout history. It's no different. Yet the media and technology has just increased the application's capability and effectiveness of this type of psychological warfare. There's this channel on YouTube called Coco Melon. Now, these are my personal opinions about this channel. Take it or leave it, but I believe that there's enough research to back what I am going to state here. The popular children's YouTube channel, CoComelon, has raised concerns among parents, educators, and child development experts for several reasons. CoComelon features rapid scene changes, bright colors, and constant motion. This type of overstimulation can overwhelm young brains, making it difficult for children to focus and engage in slower paced, real-world activities, leading to attention issues later in their development, which is all confirmed in studies. Children accustomed to fast-paced nature of shows like CoComelon might struggle with patience and attention in less stimulating environments, like nature or reality. Also, over-reliance on screen-based learning can lead to a delayed speech and language skills, as children need real-world practice to develop these skills fully. The engaging and repetitive nature of CoComelon can lead to screen addiction. Children may become irritable or restless when they are not allowed to watch their favorite shows, leading to behavioral issues, suffering from withdrawal symptoms at an early age. The channel heavily markets toys and merchandise, which can and will foster consumerism and materialistic values from a young age, and lacks any real educational, spiritual, or objectively moral knowledge. This is just one example of this. This type of show is here for profit, and I'm going to show you that in a moment. We don't need shows like this, period. These things need to go. These types of shows are mind control. And here's an example of a motive behind this. If you actually go and search the profitability, the net worth of this company, you're going to see the numbers. This is among the top 10 channels on YouTube. CoComelon's nursery rhymes net worth is $70.7 million to $424 million. Okay? CoComelon's nursery rhymes income estimated earnings is $2.33 million in the last 30 days to $6.87 million in the last 90 days. This channel gets millions and billions of views on some videos. And what parents are doing is they're just sitting their kids down, specifically toddlers, because this is directed at toddlers, right at the early stages of the formative years. They're sitting their kids down and using this as a babysitting tool rather than, enacting actual compassion, conscience, and engaging in actual one-on-one communication and educational processes and developing their skills, which are needed in this crucial part of their formative years for their brain development. Now, that's as of September 24th, 2024. You can look this up for yourself. These types of shows are mind control. They are there to create brain dead servants of the state and of corporations, of corporate entities. We need to understand this as parents. We need to understand this as individuals who want to steward and foster the uplift of consciousness and to create a free society. Stop setting your kids in front of shows like this. If you're going to use any type of shows, which you should limit the access of this based upon the studies, and it's common sense, you don't need studies to back this up, then find something that's educational. Even the older shows or cartoons are way, way better. Way, way better. Old Scooby-Doo, stuff like this, there's still propaganda in these. I'm just saying that they're way, way less harmful towards your children than this type of content. Now, I brought some studies to the table just to show this, and I'll briefly go over a few of these. You can look these up for yourself. So there's the AAP recommendations and early brain development, which is the American Academy of Pediatrics. The findings of these studies show that the AAP recommends that children under 18 months should avoid screen media other than video chatting. They cite concerns that excessive screen time can interfere with play and interaction, which are crucial for healthy brain development. The AAP emphasizes that interaction, face-to-face play is far more beneficial for young children than passive screen time. So stop using it as a babysitter, like I said. Okay, here's another one. Impact of television on cognitive development. This study was early television exposure and subsequent attentional problems in children. The findings of this study found a correlation between early television exposure before the age 3 and attention problems at the age of 7. This is all in that 7-year time period of the formative years. And that number 7 is not just random, it's synchronistic. There's a reason why that's our formative years, and it takes 7 years for it to pass. Maybe we'll get into that in the future, but look into it. The authors suggest that rapid screen changes and lack of real-world interaction in television programs may overstimulate young brains and hinder attentional development. This creates the inability to pay attention to things, to be able to focus on a specific thing, because it's constant screen changes. This is what they do in film now, like action movies, constant cuts. This cuts your attention span, and this programs the subconscious mind. The third study I brought to the table is infants and toddlers, television viewing and language outcomes. This study showed that children who watch more educational programs had better language development compared to those who watch non-educational content. However, excessive screen time in general was associated with poorer language development outcomes, emphasizing the content in the context of the media exposure. So it's not saying that you can't use some media. Some media can be highly beneficial, but it's also about the dose of that media. We have to be very, very cautious, but I doubt most people will do that. Here's another study. Time well spent relating television use to children's free time activities. The research found a high amount of screen time were associated with less time spent on creative play and social interactions, which are essential for developing social skills. Babies and toddlers need face-to-face interaction for emotional and social development, which television viewing can displace. Okay, these are just simple summaries of these studies. You can look at the actual data yourself and see what they're actually talking about. Here's another one. Neuroactivation and media exposure. And the study was associations between screen-based media use and brain white matter integrity in preschool-age children. This one's crucial. Using MRI technology, this study found that higher screen time was associated with lower microstructural integrity of the brain white matter tracts that support language literacy and cognitive skills in preschool age children. This suggests that excessive screen exposure might impede brain pathways critical for language and cognitive development. There you go, folks. There it is. We've always known it. It's common sense. Here's another one. Parental interaction and cognitive development. This study was called Associations Between Content Types of Early Media Exposure and Subsequent Attentional Problems. This study differentiated between types of content children were exposed to and found that content specifically designed to be educational had less negative impact compared to entertainment content. Crucially, interactive parental involvement during media exposure mitigated some negative effects, emphasizing the role of parental guidance in media consumption. There it is again, one-on-one. You have to be there. You have to be one-on-one. How many people do you know? How many times have you seen it where somebody just sets their kid in a high chair or on the couch or in a chair right in front of the TV and walks away? So how do corporations look at kids? Children, as tomorrow's consumers, represent a huge market for today, and therefore are fair game for corporations and social engineers. They are not children to the dark occultists. They are evolving consumers, slaves, and property to be used. The industry works to incite children to punish their parents for saying no, and blaming their parents for saying yes has more than a ring of hypocrisy about it. As children's worlds become increasingly defined by profit-driven megacorporations, a kind of corporate mind cage is encompassing children, where they are now living inside of an ego-identified brand enclosure. Children can no longer see a world without the pervasive use of manipulation as a norm. They are stuck in a proxy world that commercializes every aspect of the daily life. This type of subversion leads to the destabilization of the triune brain. rooting us in the right brain imbalance. This imbalance manifests in various detrimental ways, including addiction, hedonism, impulsiveness, gullibility, and subservience to things like authority. Additionally, it can result in heightened emotionality, decreased critical thinking, susceptibility to manipulation, and an overall lack of personal autonomy and self-identification. A person becomes a slave to their emotions and feelings. By undermining the balance between the rational and emotional aspects of the brain, this subversion erodes our capacity for independent thought and reasoned decision-making processes, leaving individuals more vulnerable to external control and influences. Individuals experience increased anxiety and weakened sense of self-identity and diminished capacity for long-term planning and goal setting, which would be part of the left brain aspects. It fosters a reliance on external validation and authority figures, making people more susceptible to propaganda and less able to engage in self-reflection and critical analysis or introspection and deep contemplation. Ultimately, this imbalance can lead to a fragmented society because the individual's mind is fragmented and then it's multiplied, where individuals are easily controlled and manipulated, further entrenching systems of power and control or slavery. Whenever we are placed either in a left brain chronic imbalance or a right brain imbalance, a specific modality of social interactions and internal thoughts take place. I associate the left brain imbalance to master thing. If a human being's left brain hemisphere becomes chronically dominant, the R complex of the brain, the reptile complex, will take over executive functions of the brain, emotions will become suppressed, and the person will become ruled by selfishness and base desires and develop a personality based in domination and control. This also happens with subversive use of symbolism. It just depends on specific context of the individual's upbringing and the type of media they're consuming. The right brain imbalance is slave thing. So if a human being's right brain hemisphere becomes chronically dominant, the limbic system will take over executive functions of the brain, defense and survival instincts will become suppressed, and the person will be ruled by their emotions and develop a personality based in submissiveness and naivete. What we really want is free thing. When both brain hemispheres are in balance, the neocortex acts as its proper role as the executive command center of the human brain, and true intelligence, meaning intellect, and the generative capacity or creativity is born. That's what we really want. And as we saw with the studies, this type of media consumption at a very early age prevents that from developing. It damages the neocortex. It destabilizes the two hemispheres. So moving on from that, now we're going to take a look at some pretty basic applications of symbolism. So we're going to look at a few examples of archetypal symbolism, what it means, and how it's applied in corporations, media, etc. The first one we're going to take a look at is solar symbolism. So the meaning and interpretation of solar symbolism is light, life, life essence, spirit, knowledge, power, enlightenment, growth, strength, kingship, sovereignty, trust, clarity, renewal, and resurrection. And as an example of this, I'm using the sun, obviously, and then a falcon on the left, which is often associated to solar cults and solar zoo types, which are used to represent the sun. And then obviously one of the most profound and powerful, long-lasting symbols of the sun is the symbol of Jesus, allegorically. Now let's look how it's used in corporations. Well, we have the Discover card. Well, it's right in the word there. Disc over. Well, what's the disc that flies over? It's the sun. We have Lucis Trust, and Lucis comes from the word lux, which means light. So it's light and it's trust, and they're using a symbol of light in this logo. Lucas Arts, right? So Luke, Lux, Lucis, these all mean light. And what do they have above the individual's head? Well, rays of light. And if you look at it really close, it looks as if It's creating an eyeball, which we will get to all-seeing eye symbolism later. We have days in, and look, they have the sun right on it. This is obviously correlated to the annual cycles of the sun, or the solar cycles through the zodiacal belt. And then what are they associating here? Well, they're associating good sleep and days in, so that you can go in a daze. Let's just replace it with D-A-Z-E, like a daze. We're in a daze, right? But also it can be associated positively to, like I said, just getting good sleep. We have Sonoko. Well, it's right in the word there. Sun, Oko. So sun, and look at the symbolism. It's a square, right? Or a diamond shape, and it's yellow. And then you have an arrow through it. That's very blatant, trying to hit the mark. And all these are subliminally acting on your subconscious to get you to associate these concepts of life energy, fuel, essence, movement, enlightenment, light in general, so that you buy their product. We have shell. Well, it's a seashell, but it's also the sun on a horizon. And then usually where you find shells is on the beach, and usually you're going there for sunsets. You have Folgers. Well, look at that. You have mountains with a sunrise or a sunset. I would believe that's a sunrise because usually people are drinking coffee in the morning, but some people drink coffee in the evening. Either way you look at it, it's still a solar symbolic reference. You have natural light. Well, what is natural light? Natural light is the sun. That's where we get all of our natural light from. Literally where it comes from. And look, they spell it as light, not as in light as in L-I-T-E, but as in L-I-G-H-T. And there's some other symbolism there, some Masonic symbolism with the eagle and the A, but it looks like the compass in there, so it looks similar to the square and compass of Freemasonry. You have Phoenix Suns, and it's a basketball team. Look at the basketball. It's a sun. It's being associated there. And the phoenix is associated to the sun not only because of its fires, but because of its resurrection properties, which is what the sun does annually and daily. You have Gulf. There's a blatant sun. And then you have BP, which some people associate to a flower. I don't disagree with that association. I also look at it as a solar symbol, though. So here we have some more examples of solar symbolism being used. We can look at car companies. Car companies use a lot of different astrotheological symbols and astrology symbols. Nissan, the word Nissan, ni or nai, actually means sun. And then san, S-S-A-N, means product or birth. It's the product of the sun, or it's the birth of the sun. Even could be correlated to the spring equinox. There could be many more correlations of this. A lot of people falsely associate the Nissan logo to Saturnian symbolism, which it could be as well, but since the name actually means sun, I believe that this is depicting the sun, obviously. But a lot of people do that because it has the horizontal line where the Nissan word is, that looks like the rings of Saturn. We have Sun Trust, which is another bank, and you'll see banks using this stuff all the time to invoke within us trust, life, prosperity, lucky. Luck is another thing about this. Fortune. So fortune is another association to solar symbolism. We also find it in sun chips, harvest cheddar, obviously, with the color as well. And we find it in dole. These things are all relating to agriculture. These things are all relating to the life essence, the life force. And we find these types of astrotheological symbols embedded into the streets and architecture all over the place. We have the Vatican. If you look at the Vatican courtyard, you can see directly right there. It is an oval shape, but it is the zodiacal circle with the obelisk in the middle. It is the circled dot as well. This is just another form of this. And you can see the divisions, which split up not only the time divisions of the seasons, but also of the zodiacal signs. So this is literally a sun, and obviously we know that Christianity is a solar cult. And then we have the Palace Charles de Gaulle in France, which has the arch in the center of it. But take a look at it. It literally looks like a sun with rays coming off of this. We will see a few more examples of the architecture and city layouts in some other symbolism as well. But also we have to understand that the arc or the archway in the center there represents the path of the sun. So we're going to take a look at some lunar symbolism here. Now, I divided this into two aspects. One aspect is the moon in the day sky and then the moon in the night sky. And we have to understand why this is crucial to divide these things. There's another division you can apply to solar symbolism, but this is a crucial division for the lunar symbolism. So the moon in the day sky is the dove. It's symbolized by the zoo type of the dove. And its meaning is knowledge, veritas, which means truth, intuition, purity, oneness, love, sharing, day, light, peace, Holy Spirit, which can be correlated to the emotions, and beauty. And then the moon in the night sky can be correlated to the owl. And its meaning and interpretations is knowledge, insight, intelligence, secrecy, predation, sight, guardian, night, darkness, and mystical. Obviously, there's more things you can apply to these. I'm just giving you the rudimentary understanding of these symbols. Let's take a look at how corporations use these. Well, we have the original marshmallow sandwich, right? The moon pie. Right there. It's lunar cult symbolism. We have DreamWorks, and we see a little boy holding a fishing rod sitting on the crescent moon with another moon in the background of that. We have the beer Blue Moon, which is extremely symbolic. A blue moon refers either to the presence of a second full moon in a calendar month or month, to the third full moon in a season containing 4, or to a moon that appears blue due to its atmospheric effects. We have blue moon software. We'll often see a lot of these symbols being used in developers and software companies. We have Moon Audio, yet again, another technological based company. We have the anime Sailor Moon, which is a pretty decent anime in my point of view. And then we have Moon Valley Nurseries. So all of these are correlating to the lunar aspects, the sacred feminine aspects within ourselves, and trying to pull on those emotional aspects. So this is just the basics of holistic moon symbolism here. Moving on here, we're going to take a look at the association of the moon in the night sky, specifically with owl symbolism. So we have the Frost Bank at 401 Congress Avenue, downtown Austin. It's an owl. You can find this all over the place. There are more buildings that are shaped directly like owls, intentionally too. And you can see that that is an owl's face. There's no denying that. We have Wise Owl Films. And remember, the owl symbolizes not only wisdom, but also intelligence. On the dollar bill, if you look closely enough, you'll find the owl in the left corner above the 1. This owl is speculated to be connected directly to the Illuminati and the Bohemian Grove Club. So we have the Bohemian Grove owl, where they do the ritual called the cremation of care. And this Bohemian statue of the owl is often correlated to Moloch or Baal or Baal, as in the owl. So B-A-apostrophe-A-L or B-A-apostrophe-O-W-L. We have Hooters, and what are we looking at? We're looking at the eyes of the owl, and we have sexual symbolism overlapping this, right? So the eyes of the owl literally become the Hooters, and owls are also predatory creatures. This is indicative of a predator observing its prey. We have Guildford owls, and this tends to be a very interesting correlation. Obviously, it's a predatory symbolic correlation. And it's in sports, you know, because you want to be the most ruthless in sports. So owls can see in the dark. They can see at night. They're the ones who can pierce the veil of the mysterious, of the unknown, right? And this is why owls are extremely powerful. So I also want to make it clear that none of these symbols are unilaterally one thing. They're not negative. This is just how they're being used. I'm just showing you how they're being used. And if you have, you know, any questions about that, you can go back to my earlier episode where I'm talking about what symbols actually are. You have the owl of Athena Minerva. Now, this is the bottom two. One is where it says laughing owls, and this is pretty important because the symbolic idea of owls laughing is the idea of mockery. So the dark occult tend to use this laughing owls as a means to employ the idea of mockery. And the owl of Athena, Minerva, is there. That's the relief that we see there, which represents wisdom. You know, that they hold the knowledge. They're the ones who hold the knowledge, and you do not have it. And they're predatory. That's what they're trying to invoke here. You have silver owl insurance, and you can see right in the background that it's the silver moon. It's the outline of the silver moon. And what are they saying with this? Well, they're saying that they will protect you from unseen or unforeseen circumstances or risk. We have Mazda. Now, a lot of people correlate Mazda to solar because Ahura Mazda is a solar deity, and that's where that word comes from. So yes, it is solar, but if you look at the emblem, it is directly a reference to an owl's face. You have the National Reconnaissance Office. We know the night. And look at this. It's completely dark. It is telling you everything that you need to know about these people that are in control. You have the Bohemian Club seal, which has the owl in the middle with the B and C on the left and right. And it says, weaving spiders come not here. Say no more, right? If we take a look at the top symbol here, this is the streets of Washington, D.C. And there's been many work to show all the zodiacal and esoteric symbols in Washington, D.C. It is quite profound how many symbols you will find here. There are pyramids, there is a pentagram, there are all kinds of numerous things. But if you look, the streets are specifically designed, and even the landscape is designed to fill in that as shadows, as an owl. And you can see that directly right there. It is literally an owl with its wings spread, showing you who really runs the show. We also have the Rotulus Rora, which was founded in 1930. And became the leader in the advertisement sector, especially in its neo ads. This company was and probably still is humongous, being signed by huge big firms. And when they started to boom, what did they do? They used owl advertisement. They literally planted an owl with giant yellow eyes on top of their building. And if you look below it, there's another all-seeing eye symbol right at its feet. This building is in Barcelona, by the way. And then we also have this crest with the skull and bones, which can be correlated to the Skull and Bones Society. And also, it gets way deeper than that when you look at its origins, going all the way back to the Comedian tradition. But also the owl on the right. Now, this is the Chi Omega. That's what this is. This is the X, which is a symbol of Osiris, which we will be explaining later, and then the Omega symbol. And they're just showing you with all this. And then one of my favorite, absolute favorite TV shows and movies, I think David Lynch is an amazing director. I think anybody who's interested in surrealism and esoteric symbolism and really getting in touch with the abstractness that you can pull from film and cinema, I think you should watch David Lynch's stuff. But in Twin Peaks, you have this idea of the owls. The owls are not what they seem, is what they say in the series. But if you look at this logo here, we have an owl with a sacred feminine figure or archetype in its beak. And anybody who knows this show will understand that the owls are not only a symbolic reference to the spirit realm or the paranormal, but also a symbolic reference to predators. I would highly recommend taking a look at this if you want to see some good owl symbolism. Okay, let's move on to the moon and the day sky, which is associated to the dove. Now, in French, the word dove comes from column, or where we get our word column from, which is very intriguing and synchronistic when it comes to the columns of Freemasonry or pillars of Freemasonry. So columns can be a reference to the dove in the day sky, specifically white columns. But as we know, the Greek pillars were actually painted, at least most of them. The paint obviously faded over time. We have the District of Columbia or Columbia. We find that doves are associated with the Holy Spirit in Christianity. And if we look to the bottom left of the slide here, we can see that it's used in weddings with the alchemical wedding, which symbolizes union. And also we have Mother Mary, who is often associated to the Holy Spirit, which is depicted in Christian symbolism and motifs as an owl. Here we just have her in her goddess gown, her attire, and it's blue, symbolizing the emotions, but also white with the red roses at her feet. If you look at her head, you'll see that she's wearing a hood, which is yellowish gold. So this is the sacred feminine and sacred masculine principle coming together. But she represents the moon in the day sky. We have to understand that the moon in the day sky is very mystical because it's very transparent to our eyes, or seemingly transparent. And this invokes this idea of spirit in the material. It looks like a ghostly image is what it looks like. So to the ancients, this was extremely powerful. We have Columbia pictures with, again, the sacred feminine being depicted here in a positive sense, I think. She's on top of the Masonic pyramid steps. She also has the Torch of Liberty. And you can see the similarities there between her and Mother Mary, obviously. We have Dove Foundation, and then we also have the Dove Company. So the idea of this Dove Company using the dove symbolism is correlating to clarity, purity, and cleanliness. These are very simple when you start to look at these. Let's take a look at some blood symbolism. What does blood symbolism mean? Well, it is associated with life, life force, vitality, flow, movement, fluidity, sacrifice, health, lineage, like bloodline lineage, cleansing, purity, and impurity. So it can be pure or impure. And you'll see that a lot of these meanings overlap because they're being associated to the observable function of these things. Well, banks really love to use this. So you have the Commerce Bank using the drop of blood correlating to movement, fluidity, because currency is like a current, but it's also sacrifice, blood money. We have this idea of blood money. And that you also have this association to health with this as well, because the more money you have, most likely the more healthy you are. You have more access to healthcare, etc. Obviously, we have another health associated thing, which makes sense pragmatically, right? We have the Red Cross, the American Red Cross blood drive, and they're using the cross, which is a symbol of power, and then a blood drop. You have the cross right in the middle. The cross is also an addition, meaning it's a masculine symbol as well. So it's adding something. So this is trying to associate not only to health, but it's also associating to purity and impurity, cleansing, lineage. There's a big whole historical thing about where the American Red Cross comes from with the Templars and Rosicrucians and a lot of other stuff. I'm not going to get into that here. Potentially may cover that in the future, but it's also correlating to vitality, right? Or life force, giving life. We also have a lot of oil companies that use this symbol, and we can see why, because oil is associated to the blood of the earth. We have Getty. We also have Luke Oil, right? And Luke is light again. So the light oil, right? And you can see the blood drops and the color red being used here. We also have the company Pemex, which is using this blood drop symbolism with an eagle. But it looks like a very nefarious eagle in my point of view, but it could be a phoenix as well. So resurrection would be another thing about this. So the purity and impurity is that we often see that blood is either pure or impure, right? We have the idea of bastards, we have the idea of pure lineage, things like this, but also blood diseases and bloodletting rituals and things like this. There's a lot of great symbolism here if you get deep into it. But these companies are trying to use this subliminally and at times subversively to influence you to associate these concepts to these companies so that you're more likely to support these companies. Let's take a look at Saturn's symbol or Saturnian symbol. So Saturn symbolism, its meaning and interpretations are binding, protection, limits, reaping and harvest, time, discipline, trials and tribulations, and lessons. There's a lot more you can add on to this, of course, But because of the rings around Saturn, we associate this idea of binding. The rings are binding, but they're also protective, right? They're like a ward. They're a protective agent as well, but they're also limits at the same time. It's a limiting thing. It's a boundary. We also associate Saturn to reaping, being the Grim Reaper, and this is associated to the harvest rituals that take place normally during or after the autumnal equinox. We also have the idea that it's being associated to time, which is why Saturn is called in the Roman and Greek traditions Chronos. But it's also discipline. It's about disciplining yourself, and it's about trials and tribulations and lessons, learning lessons. So Saturn was the opposing celestial object to the sun. And the dark occult used this as a representation of the dark sun, the black sun, because it was the furthest celestial object that they could see with their naked eye, specifically being one of the Elohim. In Rome, they referred to Kronos as Saturn, and sometimes Kronos as well. But we often see the depiction of Kronos eating his own son for fear of a prophecy that the sun may overthrow him. And the sun represents S-U-N, so it's this ego identification with dominance and power. So Saturn has a very dark connotation in a lot of secret societies and a lot of symbolism. Let's take a look at how they use it. So we have Nike with the check. That represents not only the scythe of the Grim Reaper, but also a portion of the rings of Saturn. And we all know that Nike is a horrible, horrible company that supports slave labor. We have Saturn Electronics, and we'll see again this repetition of astrotheological symbols being used in automobiles and software or electronics. So we have Saturn Electronics, and we can see right there, they're using the symbol of Saturn directly in their logo. We have Sega Saturn from back in the day, the game console. We just have the company Saturn, and again, they have the symbol of Saturn directly there in their logo. We have PlanetSide software. Now this one's a little bit more cryptic, but if you look very closely, that line, that slash down is the planet, it's the edge of the planet, and then the ring that's horizontal is the ring of Saturn. PlanetSide software, Saturn. We have DirecTV correlating to this idea of movements, binding, limits, trials, tribulations, all these things, right? You have Saturn, the car, and you can see there another direct symbol of Saturn, and obviously it's in the name. It's very exoteric. You have Saturn systems, and you have Saturn oil and gas, right? So we also have a blood symbol here on this one, but you can see the ring of Saturn around it, and they call themselves Saturn. So there's a lot more to do with Saturnian symbolism and cults and rituals and things like that. This is just all basics. This is mainly for the layman's or the newly initiated. One of the most well-known symbols of the world is the all-seeing eye. We find the all-seeing eye everywhere, and a lot of people misinterpret what it actually means. A lot of people do not have symbolic literacy, and a lot of people are just falling prey to a lot of propaganda as well. So what is the meaning and interpretation of the all-seeing eye? It means God, creator, divinity, source, light, knowledge, intelligence, truth, spark, sovereignty, unity, consciousness, vision, omniscient, and enlightenment. It also means a lot of other things as well. These are just the basics. At this point, most people have been probably overwhelmed with the correlation of the all-seeing eye within media specifically, or within Hollywood. Let's take a look at all-seeing eye symbolism being used. We have it on the $1 bill with the term Novus Ordo Seclorum, which means New World Order. And the idea here is that the dark occult are claiming to represent that light of knowledge, and that the people of the world, the masses, their slaves, are not in the light. So they are the stones of the pyramid. And what they really want to do on another level, okay, is they want to block that light out. They don't want to block themselves out, unless they want to not be seen, obviously, but they want to block that true light of source and care and intelligence out of the entire world, if we're looking at it holistically, right? So they want to solidify the pyramid. They want to put the capstone on the pyramid and block that light out. When in fact, what we need to do is actually destroy that metaphorically and become the pure light and have a connection to nature, source, enlightenment, and truth specifically, right? So this symbol is not an evil symbol. It is a very positive symbol at its essence, but it can be used nefariously and for manipulation for a lot of people. So we have the Illuminati Entertainment right there. You have the all-seeing eye. We have a company that's a security company called All-Seeing Eye, meaning that they are all-seeing. They're omniscient. They see it all. They see all the crimes, right? They're here to supervise as the watchmen. We have CBS, a news company, using the all-seeing eye. And they're representing that they see it all. This is what they're trying to correlate it with, that they're enlightened, they have the light, and that they can see everything. And they're going to, quote unquote, ostensibly give you the good knowledge, right? That they're going to give you the knowledge, the truth. They're associating that to truth. So they're trying to give you the truth, but they're not really doing that. We all know that. We have Time Warner Cable. Well, there's another all-seeing eye symbolism. NVIDIA, right? Well, what is NVIDIA? Well, it's a graphics card company, right? They make graphics card. And what is graphics card? Well, it's for visual stimulation. And what do they have? They have the all-seeing eye there. And also with the color green, associating it to the Anahata chakra and the color of nature as well. And NVIDIA actually means seeing. And if we take a look at Hollywood and celebrities, we will find so many examples of all-seeing eyes being used in advertisements, magazines, movies. You know, that's such a huge rabbit hole to go down, but here are some examples of that. You can see on the screen where people are covering up the one eye, and this associates the ancient Egyptian mythology as well, and we will cover some of that mythology in the future, but I'm not going to go deep into all of this. And a lot of people associate this to say that they're all part of the Illuminati. I do not agree with that. It is definitely a trendy thing, and it's definitely a sensational thing to use whenever you have people who are claiming that. Now, I would say that a lot of them are, a lot of them are part of it, but there's a lot that are not as well. So just because I do this, or anything like that, or this, doesn't mean that I'm necessarily part of the Illuminati. But you have to set your bar for evidence for these claims pretty decently high. You can't just say, oh, they're using an all-seeing eye symbol, so they must be part of the Illuminati. You have to have some other basis for that. Now, I do believe symbolism is a very powerful language, but also we can be led astray. Symbolism can be a red herring for things as well, right? So we have to be very cautious about this. It is a safe bet that most of these people are part of secret societies or secret organizations. Definitely a safe bet. And totally has the aura and the stench of the Faustian legend, meeting the devil at the crossroads to sell your soul for talent. But we also have to understand that there are more nuanced ways of being able to use the symbolism. I wear all-seeing eye symbolism, and doesn't mean that I'm part of the Illuminati. My father built a Jägermeister igloo and a Jägermeister pyramid in the backyard. The pyramid has an all-seeing eye on it. We've used it in our logos quite a bit. So the point is that just because a company is using this doesn't mean that they're directly affiliated with it. You have to have more evidence to support that claim. It is one means of evidence, yes, but it is not the totality of what you need to prove that. Information Awareness Office. It's really Propaganda Awareness Office, right? So right there, you have the all-seeing eye and the pyramid symbolism. And what are they doing? They're supervising the earth. They're overseeing the earth because they are in control. So let's look at pyramid symbolism, which is usually associated with the all-seeing eye symbolism. We have the company Sprint. We have an as above, so below pyramid here with Sprint. And Sprint, subconsciously, not only is it correlating to movement, but it's also correlating to spirit, because spirit is about movement as well. We have Pyramid Technologies Incorporated. Okay, another pyramid. We have the advertisement where we have Doritos being advertised as a pyramid, because Doritos are shaped like a triangle as well, but they're using that in Las Vegas with the black pyramid there. We have the Bass beer. We'll find a lot of symbolism in beer. There's so much symbolism in alcohol logos. It's insane. But they have the triangle there, which is associated to the Holy Mountain and pyramid. We have Sitgo. We have a pyramid there. It's a three-sided pyramid, but still a triangle in its shape archetypally, and is associating itself to these ideas of light, knowledge, truth, energy. We have another alcohol beverage here, which has the pyramid in the middle. It's a black pyramid. We have Delta Airlines, symbolizing movement, enlightenment, truth. We have the camel logos, which we'll be talking about some of that stuff here later, but you can see the Great Pyramid in the background there. We have Fidelity Investments. Now, this is a powerful one. Right there, you have the same sigil, the same logo that's not only on the Information Awareness Office, but also on the $1 bill. You have MI5 and the intelligence agencies using this. This is the British Intelligence Agency. They have the pyramid and it's sectioned off, and the eye is at the top of the pyramid in the capstone, right? So phonetically, it is the I-E-Y-E, so the all-seeing eye, but it's also a pyramid. You can also see that they are pledging an oath to the crown as well there. So in the army, we have the 7th Army, Pyramid of Power, the 7 steps to hell. You'll find in the army, especially in the Black Ops patches, so many dark symbolic associations to many, many horrific things that they're doing. And this is just another one, 7 steps to hell, right? It's also a shape of an A, which is kind of interesting. And 7 is a very symbolic number, which we'll cover in the future. We have creative technology, and you can see that the A in that is symbolic of a pyramid. That's properly associated. We have pyramid healthcare. Well, it's a pyramid scheme. Makes sense. It's a pyramid scheme. We have Adobe. Again, the A is the pyramid. We have pyramid production. So we find this in movie production companies a lot. And you'll notice in movie production companies, there's so many of them. It's insane how many, but they always have these really, really symbolic and esoteric names to them. We have Pyramid Filmworks, another movie production company. And then if you look at the Naval Air Warfare Center, the NAWC, what do you see? A pyramid with the pentagonal star in where the eye would be. So this next section is specifically based on sexual subversive use of symbolism in advertisement. So let's take a look at this. I would say that this is probably one of the most widespread use of symbolism in advertisement. It's a very good manipulation tactic to get people to buy into your product. So we have Marlboro, which is the cigarette itself is associated to the phallus. And what do we have? We have a female here. Won't anybody cigarette me? I mean, it's right there, folks. They're not hiding this stuff. You just have to have the eyes to see. Well, there's another logo there. There's another ad. And look, all the guys are handing their cigarettes to her, and she is taking it. So this is symbolic of an orgy or a gangbang is what they would call it, right? This can also be subliminally correlated to promiscuous behavior. So if you look here in Disney advertisement for Mickey Mouse, you'll find Minnie Mouse and Mickey Mouse, and look at the shape of her dress. Totally a shape of a phallus. And you'll find a lot of this in Disney films. If you look at the film Tangled, you'll see the hidden, subliminal, and subversive use of the word sex here. If you look at beauty products use this quite a bit. You can look at this use of the lipstick representing the phallus or the red rocket, and the face is directly over it, symbolizing fellatio. And bright and clear, right? Bright and clear. And look at 7-Up. 7-Up obviously represents the rising of the Kundalini energy through the 7 chakras. But 7-Up can also be correlated to the northern circumpolar constellation of the Little Bear that circles around Polaris. So that's also the 7-Up, the 7 stars that are up, right? And look, we have a family. The Fresh Up family drink. So what we see here is the 3 family members on the front. The bottle itself represents the phallus, obviously. You have the mother behind the father and the father behind the son. And then you have the baby who's all the way at the bottom. The youngest little sister, the youngest little girl, all the way at the bottom, riding this phallus symbol. This is total perversion. And another one here that's directed at children. It might seem harmless, but when you understand the sexual symbolism behind this, you can see directly what it's representing. You have another one here for candies.com, and you have a female who's sitting on top of a monitor, a computer monitor, with a spaceship lifting off between her legs. Like, it can't be more blatant. You have a Burger King one. It will blow your mind away, is what it says here. BK Super 7-incher. Like, this is pretty, pretty obvious what this is talking about. It just tastes better. This one seems really overt, so I haven't confirmed that that one is a direct Burger King ad, but still somebody is using this as a form of symbolic reference to the act of fellatio. We'll find it often in food magazines or food advertisements. The lady is holding the chicken wing, which symbolizes the phallus, and she obviously has a very flustered face in that, which you probably cannot see. It's in all kinds of cigarette logos. Alive with pleasure, Newport, right? And then you have a guy with a hose that's spraying the female in the mouth. I mean, this is pretty blatant. And again, with the beauty products, we have the beauty company called Chanel, which Channel, and it has the Vesica Pisces, the two circles overlapping, and the center where they overlap and make the womb shape is the channel of birthing, the channel of sexual pleasure. So this is literally associating to that. We also see in food advertisement where bananas and donuts are associated with the two genders' genitalias, and they were placed directly beside each other. Who eats a banana and then eats a donut? Nobody really does that, at least not many people. You have break out the frosty bottle. We find this in alcohol a lot, but if you look in the glass very closely, you'll see the word sex there. Look at the ice. It says S at the top, E, and then X below it. Subliminal influencing. You have the magazine SFX. Now, these guys are very well known for obscuring the bottom of the F. If you look at their magazines, you'll see this all over the place, to make it look like it says SEX. They're using that subliminally because they know what it will relate to at the subconscious level. And then we have this new show, Agatha All Along, right? Sex. It's right there. And then Skittles. I mean, this one's kind of interesting. So Skittles, another very toxic candy for children to consume. It says berry explosion, right? But if you look, the Skittle is off to the left with the S on it, and the three letters there spell sex. So sex, but also sex explosion. It's directly there. We find it in the camel thing with the cool camel guy, the Joe Camel advertisement. And Joe Camel has actually had a lot of backlash because of their advertisement, and even went to court over it, I believe. But the mascot is designed to be subliminal to the bravado of the masculine archetype, right? The cool guy. And there's a lot of sexual symbolism with this. You have the girl in the background on the nice car, the sports car, smooth character, right? Smooth cigarettes. Well, smooth sex, right? That's what that's associating to. You have Pepsi logo. And I mean, if you look at the female sticking her leg up on the bench, with the male with his fingers up in between her legs. I mean, this is an old advertisement, And then we have Sega Saturn again, right? So we have the Sega Genesis or Sega Saturn. I can't remember which one this is, but this is a direct advertisement that they had. And it has a male holding the joystick like you would be holding his phallus. And it says here, the more you play with it, the harder it gets. So this is directed at kids, because mostly kids were playing at this time. So these are just some examples of sexual symbolism in advertisement. You'll find this all over the place. You're welcome to do more research into this. Now, obviously, when it comes to subversive use of sacred symbolism and understanding the human psychology, the media has it down. They have it down to a T. They know exactly what they're doing. So media, at least in the current day and age, is literally just mind control. We all know that. It's all mind control. It's all it is. Yes, they give you little bits of truth here and there, but it's always wrapped up in a fear-based tactic to control your mind. The media is controlled opposition and plays a powerful role in shaping political beliefs and public opinion through various techniques. from framing and selective reporting to propaganda, subliminal symbols, and censorship. Understanding these mechanisms is essential for critically evaluating the information presented in the media and recognizing the fear-based mind control. So as we can see here, we have the left wing and the right wing media platforms usually. So we have Fox News and CNN. Now, CNN tends to be more right brain oriented, but they're using the opposite colors. They're correlating that to a more masculine archetype, whereas Fox News tends to be more left brain oriented, and they're correlating their colors more to a right brain archetype or sacred feminine archetype, right? So the blues represent more passivity, the reds represent more aggression, right? But it actually works out properly in many ways. They're both aggressive. They're both completely deplorable and despicable. You know, they're getting paid to spread lies to the population rather than truth. And if you actually watch, I'll pull a clip up here. If you watch, they're all scripted. You know, you can look at every media channel, and this goes for across the board too, from CNN, you know, CBS, Fox News, all these media channels. They are scripted. You know, they're told what to say, and they say it. These news broadcasters do not care about the truth. They take a paycheck to lie to the public. That's what they do. And it's deplorable. It's absolutely despicable.
Biased and false news has become all too common on social media.
More alarming, some media outlets publish things they simply aren't true without checking facts first.
Unfortunately, some members of the media use their platforms to push their own personal bias and agenda to control exactly what people think. And this is extremely dangerous to our democracy.
The more we hear something, the more likely we are to accept it as truth. This is the mechanism by which propaganda operates. Through relentless exposure, messages become familiar and therefore comfortable. It's cognitive fluency at work, leading us to believe what we've been told repeatedly, regardless of its accuracy. Media is weaponized to control narratives and to suppress dissents, being people who have oppositional ideas to what the media puts out. By selectively reporting stories and omitting crucial information, those in power can manipulate public perception and maintain control over the populace. The media thrives on our emotions, using fear, anger, and outrage as a tool to incite reaction. So emotional mind control is what I'm saying here. By sensationalizing events and framing stories in emotionally charged ways, they can divert our attention from critically thinking. This emotional hijacking leaves us vulnerable to suggestion and less likely to question the information presented to us. These covert signals can be embedded in advertisement, movies, and even news broadcasts, thus any form of media. While many dismiss the idea of subliminal messaging as mere myth, psychological studies show that these hidden cues can indeed shape our preference and decisions, like I showed before. You can look at all the studies all over the world. The media is the main weapon for the dark occult to control the population's idea of what policies are taking place, what geopolitical things are going on, and just in general to keep the population in a constant state of fear. It's always fear-based propaganda. So this is a quote from David Rockefeller when he's addressing the Trilateral Commission, June 1991. He says, "We are grateful to the Washington Post, the New York Times, Time Magazine, and other great publications whose directors have attended our meetings and respected their promise of discretion for almost 40 years. It would have been impossible for us to develop our plan for the world if we had been subjugated to the lights of publicity during those years. But the world is more sophisticated and prepared to march towards a world government. The supernatural sovereignty of an intellectual elite and world bankers is surely preferable to the national autodetermination practiced in the past centuries." So he's telling you here, folks, that they control this, that these people's allegiances are to the dark occult or to the elite ruling class. And they disseminate the fake information, the false information, the misinformation to the public. The media and the meds. It's really important to understand some of the historical backgrounds of this. There's a direct correlation between the media and the Medes. The term media comes from the Greek word media, which refers to the land of the Medes. It also means to bring to the middle, like to mediate, you know, the mid, right? Vowels are interchangeable as well. But that's not what they're doing, right? They're not non-biased. They're not just relaying the information. They have a bias, a cognitive bias, and a confirmation bias as well. The Medes formed a powerful kingdom known as the Median Empire during the 7th century BCE. This kingdom was characterized by a centralized political structure and territorial expansion, with its capital at Ecbatana, modern Hamadan. The earliest reference to the Media and the Medes appears in ancient texts, including those by Greek historians like Herodotus and Xenophon, as well as in Assyrian inscriptions. Media was a significant region in the ancient Near East, strategically located between the Persian heartland and the other powerful empires, such as Assyria and Babylon. The Medes played a crucial role in regional politics, particularly in the decline of the Assyrian Empire. After the rise of the Achaemenid Empire under Cyrus the Great, the Medes were integrated into the Persian Empire, and the Media became one of its administrative regions. So the point that I'm trying to make here is to understand that this connection between the Media and these ancient power struggles have a direct tie-in. And as you start to study this, you will find that bloodlines connected to these ancient empires now control a lot of these media and geopolitical propaganda machines that are being used against the public all over the world. After the rise of the Achaemenid Empire under Cyrus the Great, the Medes were integrated into the Persian Empire, and the Media became one of its administrative regions. Now, the administrative roles of this was to use propaganda in the specific strategic location to create controlled opposition and fervor, religious and political, in these regions so that these types of power struggles can take place, obviously. So another point that I like to make is that when you follow a lot of the lineage of the bloodlines here, you'll see that a lot of the media is still to this day, especially in the Middle East, controlled by these same groups. Okay, so that's another part of this that's really crucial to understand. Psychological warfare through symbolism. That's really what we've been talking about this whole episode. Psychological warfare through symbolism refers to the strategic use of symbols, imagery, and cultural references by entities such as governments, corporations, intelligence agencies, or think tank organizations to influence the perceptions, emotions, and behaviors of a targeted group. This strategy leverages psychological tactics to weaken the enemy's resolve, create confusion, and diminish their will to fight, ultimately achieving strategic objectives with minimum physical confrontation. So that's the point here. They're trying to destroy the willpower so people will not stand up against tyranny and authoritarians. And they want to do this with the minimum amount of energy input and the minimum amount of confrontation in the output, being that we want to control you, but we don't want you to, attack us about it, obviously. So we don't want physical confrontation. So this is used in the power struggles on the exoteric level through the wars, like the Cold War, Vietnam. There's all kinds of examples of this. This is used not only in foreign war applications, but also domestic war applications. And people don't understand that for you to be in a war, your governments don't need to declare it. That's a falsity. That's an appeal to authority. You can be in a war and your governments don't declare it. Everybody thinks that these superpowers have to say, we're in a war and now we're in a war. No, you have to look at the de facto condition that's taking place and the techniques that are being used, whether foreign or domestic. So I wanted to give some examples of some psychological war operations that have taken place in the past. So we have Operation Mockingbird. The CIA's Operation Mockingbird involved recruiting journalists and using media outlets to spread propaganda and shape public perception. Now, this is completely based on Edward Bernays' work. We have Operation Northwoods, which is a false flag operation, which was proposed by the Joint Chiefs of Staff and the CIA. Operation Northwood included plans to stage false flag terrorist attacks on American soil to justify military intervention in Cuba. This is just another example. You can read more of this stuff. You can look into more of this stuff. We also have the well-known now declassified MK Ultra, which is, yes, another psychological war technique that's used against the citizens. MK Ultra involved experiments on mind control and psychological manipulation. Symbols of authority and scientific legitimacy were used to justify unethical experiments on unwitting subjects. This is still being used today under a different name. Vietnam War propaganda. The CIA and the military used symbolic actions and imagery to win the hearts, the quote-unquote hearts and minds of the Vietnamese people. This included distributing leaflets with images of American soldiers providing aid and protecting civilians. That is not what happened in Vietnam. And anybody who studied Vietnam knows better. And I'd say a good film to look at the not only the symbolic essence of esoteric spiritual journey, but also like some of the gruesomeness that took place there. There's many good films out there, but I'd say a good film would be Apocalypse Now to study. Now that movie has a lot more esoteric stuff in it, but the exoteric stuff is, pretty decent as well. We have the counterterrorism efforts post 9/11. After 9/11 attacks, the CIA and other government agencies used symbols of patriotism and unity, such as the American flag and the phrase "United we stand," to bolster the public support for the war on quote-unquote terror. Okay, there's a lot more to that, but it's really just fear-based mind control is what it is. There's also a lot of esoteric, ritualistic, dark symbolism that takes place on 9/11. Both towers representing the two pillars of consciousness, or the two pillars of Freemasonry, and Building 7 representing the third Ionic Tower, which, who knows, maybe I'll cover that in the future. We'll see how this series goes. Now we have some in other countries, obviously. We have the Russian KGB and modern FSB. They had the Cold War propaganda going on. The KGB, the Soviet Union's main security agency, used psychological warfare extensively during the Cold War. So we have the British MI6, which used to be the MI5. We looked at their symbol earlier. In World War II, the British intelligence agencies used psychological operations to demoralize the enemy and bolster Allied morale, right? This is used by these states constantly, okay? We have the Israeli Mossad. They had this operation known as Entebbe, which was a rescue mission at the Entebbe airport in 1976. The Israeli Mossad has often used operations in the Middle East to demoralize not only the domestic, but also the foreign presence of other armies and things like this in the Middle East. So there's a lot to this, obviously, but they were just trying to undermine their quote-unquote adversaries. And they often use assassinations. Assassinations is a great psychological warfare technique, and also correlates to the ritual called the killing of the king. And in North Korea, oh man, they use psychological warfare constantly. But they have the North Korean Reconnaissance General Bureau. You can take a look at all these operations. There are plenty more where this came from. These were just some examples I wanted to give of psychological warfare geopolitically. And I think that's all the time we have for today, folks. I think this was a great episode on mind control. I hope that all of the viewers and listeners gained value from this and learned something, especially those who are new to this. And I know there's a lot of veterans that are coming and watching this as well, so I'm trying to bring in at least some high level or more advanced and more sophisticated knowledge to this. The next episode will be on pure forms. This will be episode 2.2 of Symbolism. And it's going to be more in the esoteric realm, especially getting back to the ancient Platonic forms and pure forms of symbolism. So don't miss out on that next episode. Until next time.